I want you all to remember that eventually this field will be ruled by people, not by the ones who know the technique or even the statistics, but who knows what questions to ask, who knows what to look for. It will be ruled by the person who knows what to do once the answers comes. And therefore, it will be ruled by people who understand business and not just people who understand statistics. Statistics plus business. Business by itself is not enough. Statistics by itself is also not enough. You need to understand both. And therefore, any studies that you do have to have the business case study outlook to it and not just the tools and techniques outlook to it. So whether a person knows Hadoop, etc., well, you'll have jobs up to a point, you'll have careers up to a point, as long as analytics firm seem to keep flourishing. But going into top management, actually running a business, growing it, well, these things are not going to be sufficient for you to do that. Some of you would have heard that inverted comma line that I put, what do they know of cricket who know only cricket? Has anybody heard of this? Okay, there's a West Indian cricket historian called Sailor James. He said to understand cricket itself, you need to know so much more than cricket. So what he's talking about is anybody, it's very true of any consulting field, market research, journalism, advertising. Unless you have a wide range of knowledge, you will not know the relevance of these techniques. You will not know when to use, what to use, how to interpret. That becomes absolutely crucial. So when I talk to students and try to make them understand analytics, when I try to make people understand correlation, right? The simplest example I can give, depending on the age of audience. If the audience is, 20 to 25, I talk about Sachin Tendulkar and Rahul Dravid. If the audience is 45 plus, my age and above, I talk about Sunil Gavaskar and somebody many of you would not have heard of, a guy called Gundappa Vishwanath. Right? Sunil Gavaskar and Gundappa Vishwanath, they're brothers-in-law. They both played for India. They were both very good batsmen. Gavaskar was more consistent, more successful, scored more centuries, had a much better batting average. But whenever Vishwanath scored well, India would win the game. Whenever Vishwanath failed, India would lose the game. Gavaskar scoring well or not did not affect India's prospects so much. That's direct correlation. From the India's result point of view, Vishwanath's performance was more important because it was better correlated with India's success. So that is an actual application of statistics to people who have passion about cricket. Right? So to students who want to understand standard deviation, right, it's very easy to talk about, and people don't understand range. Now, range is a measure of consistency, but it's a limited measure of consistency. Why? Because Bradman's range was 334. Huge range, so very inconsistent. Does it make him a bad batsman? He scored a duck, he also scored a 334. But we all know that Bradman is the greatest batsman in the history of the game. So you bring in standard deviation, right? And that's how you actually measure whether a batsman is truly consistent or not. So intuitively, anybody who follows cricket knows that Virendra Sehwag is more inconsistent than Rahul Dravid. But statistically, we can prove it through standard deviation. Right? So it's an easy way to grasp the concepts. So all I'm trying to say is that the concepts are better understood, are better applied if we have a wider range of knowledge. And since India is cricket crazy, I use cricket as the just explanation. How do you explain outliers? We have all heard of outliers. What's the easiest way to explain outliers? You talk about Rajesh Khanna. He became a superstar in 1969. By 1973, he was finished. He had 15 consecutive hits in the 3.5 year period, which still remains a record. He is an outlier. Can you follow Rajesh Khanna as a model for every actor? No. Can you follow Tendulkar as a model? He's an outlier. At 16, he was playing Test cricket for India. Who is a role model for ordinary people in life? It is Akash Chopra. He was a good cricketer. He made the maximum use of his talent. He had a long and successful Ranji Trophy career. Right? A Tendulkar is an outlier and therefore cannot be a role model for anybody. So all I'm trying to say is that the wider your knowledge, the better you will apply statistics itself. Right? And finally, you have to formulate the problem. As they say in cricket, it's not enough to know how to play all the shots. It's also enough to know when to play the shots. That's the difference between a great batsman and a good batsman, just for example. I'll give you an example of this, how to formulate the problem here. So, a client had given us a list of their customers. We were supposed to call them up and do a customer satisfaction study. Now, and we did a systematic sampling. Now that means the client gave us about 5,000 records. We're supposed to do 500 interviews. So every 10th person we called. We organized them an order. Every 10th person we called and did a sampling, and that's how we did the survey. At the end of the study, the client said, I want you to analyze the data based on which city the client is living in. The respondent is living in, sorry. Now, we had not controlled for this variable in the sampling. This came later. If we had thought about it earlier, we would have said we'll have so many people from Bombay, so many from Chennai, so many from Delhi. But we didn't control for it. So what did we do? From the 500 that we had, we simply found how many are from Bombay, how many are from Delhi. Then the client asked us, is there a skew in this data, or does it represent a population? Now, what kind of test would you do here? So, what we did is, and Sir can tell us if we did the right thing, we said this is a non-parametric test. We said if the same 500 was to be 5,000, this is the distribution we got. The expected distribution is the actual distribution of the 5,000 customers. The observed distribution is what we have got in our sample, and we did chi-square. Once I say chi-square, I'm sure all of you are able to relate to it. But the real skill is in formulating the problem, knowing that chi-square is appropriate test here, and formulating it to run a chi-square. Now, how I run a chi-square? Software will do it for me. It's good if I know it, but it's not a disaster if I don't know it. But it is a disaster if I don't know that chi-square is appropriate test here, if I don't know how to formulate the question for chi-square, if I don't know that chi-square works on numbers and not on percentages. Right? That is a disaster. So that's what I mean by saying you need to know how to formulate the problem. Okay? So, I'm through, sir.
I profusely thank Ashok for a very insightful talk, which in the parlance of the founder of Great Lakes, academic elegance with business relevance. So how relevant it is in the business, and how to formulate the problem, understand the appropriateness of a technique. If I say there is a chi-square test, you will know what is a chi-square test, you will know the problem. I'm in calculation. But does this problem entail the use of chi-square, or what is the technique that I will use, is something very important. And as you progress in this analytics course, you will discover the technique that is appropriate. Because there are 4 components, as I told you: description, what has happened; diagnosis, why it has happened; prediction, what will happen; prescription, what should you do. All the 4 components are very critical for analytics.